I think that the internet is going to be one of the major forces for reducing the role of government. The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cash, a method whereby on the internet you can transfer funds from A to B without A knowing B or B knowing A.
What is a Bitcoin?
What is Bitcoin? What backs a Bitcoin?
You put some of your money, real money, online, and it turns into Bitcoin.
I don't even know why we call them coins, except that they call it coins in the name.
I think Bitcoin has turned into a massive multiplayer online game where speculators are trying to out-speculate each other.
Is it a means of exchange or an asset class?
I see you taking my real dollars, and then you give me virtual money in return.
Yes, the blockchain is truly revolutionary. Yes, Bitcoin is Tulip Mania 2.0. Yes, cryptocurrency is a nail in the coffin of the bankster parasites. Yes, digital currency is a tool of the totalitarian tyrants. No, these statements are not contradictory. But don't worry if you think they are. You're just a victim of the Bitcoin psyop.
When you want to buy something normally, using your normal bank card, this is what happens. I give my card details to the shop asks the bank if I'm good for the money. The bank checks its records to see if I've got enough in my account. If I do, it lets the shop know. It updates its records to show the movement of money from my account to the shop's. Oh, and it takes a little cut for its trouble. Now, if you wanted to remove the bank from that system, who else would you trust to keep those records and not alter them or cheat in any way? Well, I wouldn't trust you. I wouldn't trust you. In fact, I wouldn't trust any single person. But I might trust everyone. The idea is you don't have a central record of transactions. Instead, you distribute many, many copies of this ledger around the world. Each owner of each copy records every transaction. So, to buy something using cryptocurrency, I give the shop my details. The shop asks all the bookkeepers if I'm good for the money. The bookkeepers all check their records to see if I have enough. If I do, they tell the shop, and then all update their records to show the movement of money. So there's no way that a forged transaction can make it in. If I try to alter a ledger, it won't match all of the other copies, and it gets rejected. Oh, and one of them, at random, will be given a reward of some newly created cryptocurrency. This is how cryptocurrencies work. And remember, all of these bookkeepers, all of these ledgers, they're not actually people, they're computers. Lots of computers.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold.
I would short it if there was an easy way to do it.
I think it's a scumball activity.
Bitcoin is the most superior monetary technology that has ever existed.
It's one of the crazier speculative stocks as a very hard asset.
Bitcoin's hope.
The year is 1948. The world is in turmoil. There has been global devastation. Untold numbers of families from Europe, China, Russia, and elsewhere have lost nearly everything. their factories, their real estate, their stores, their farms, their gold, their art, everything but their very lives. They escape, penniless to new lands. Amidst all this wreckage, with millions dead from World War II, there remain many millions more who must rebuild everything from the rubble. Yet, despite the turmoil, there is hope. There is the unceasing human spirit of creation. The survivors, our story's families, begin to rebuild. They teach their children this history. They warn of the dangers of tyrants that rise in the shadow of the collapse of money and property rights. But issuing warnings is all they can do. They have no defense against the return of tyranny and monetary debasement, should it happen again. In cryptographic functions and peer-to-peer technologies to invent something new, something which he hopes might someday serve as money that can never be looted or corrupted by governments, tyrants, thieves, or fools. The year is 2021. A cycle that leads to tyranny and war appears to be repeating. Money is debased. Governments take control of industries through mandates and decrees. International disputes upset a fragile balance where some nations became dependent on others for their necessities. A tyranny has become the largest exporter in the world. People are easily frightened into hysteria. Even within nations, divisiveness has reached record levels, even within families. There is a battle, but it is not a military conflict. It is not fought between nations. It is an undeclared war. It is a war over property, wealth, power, and money. It is a war between this story's families who seek freedom and those who seek easy rewards at others' expense. Freedom requires living with the consequences of the actions one takes. Freedom requires risk-taking, setbacks, losses, and failures before achieving success. Freedom's opponents seek to avoid this work. They demand results without doing the needed work. This does not work. Every time this path is taken, it leads to tyranny. It is a dead end. Literally, it ends in death. Yet freedom's enemies now possess power in every nation on earth. They meddle in every industry. They promise to fix everything if everyone just obeys their orders. They demonize the disobedient and blame them for the world's problems. Once again, the world is in turmoil. Meanwhile, in relative obscurity, the something that was invented by that sole engineer and released into the world in 2009 is taking root and growing. Its mysterious maker has disappeared. This was part of his design. It is taking on a life of its own. Many families now see it as a source of shelter and protection from the turmoil they see happening around them. They are now using it to protect their wealth, their property, and freedom. The year is 2048. 100 years have passed since 1948. As happened then, many of the world's currencies collapsed. Many nations fell. Many businesses dissolved. But, unlike 1948, it is not a time of poverty, of devastation.
Thanksgiving dinner, my grandmother asked me, what the heck is this Bitcoin stuff anyway, right? And I said to her, do you remember when Visa cards first came out? You were used to paying with cash or with a check, and then a Visa came out. It was this weird payment system that you didn't understand. And she said, yeah, I remember that. I said, well, Bitcoin is just the next evolution of another payment system.
Bitcoin. By now, you've probably heard of it. The wild fluctuations in its price has gained the attention of the mainstream financial media. But Bitcoin is much more than just your average investment. Beneath all the hype and hysteria lies what could be the most important technology of our lifetimes. So what exactly is it? To fully appreciate the characteristics that make Bitcoin a potentially world-changing technology, we first need to understand what money is.
Currency started developing 6,000 to 9,000 years ago, some sort of medium of exchange. And people used something of value. Societies around the world, though, started to select gold and silver as their primary currency about 3,000 years ago. And then in about 680 BC, they became money when they were minted into coins of equal weights. Governments started creating representative currencies where you deposit your gold and silver, or they have gold and silver in the treasury and they come out with notes that are basically a claim check on the gold. So they're supposed to be as good as gold because you can always convert them into gold.
Throughout history, precious metals were chosen as money, not through government decree, but because of their unique features. Gold is rare, easily recognizable, portable, durable, and divisible. Above all, because gold is difficult to find and labor-intensive to mine, refine, and mint, it has always been perceived as a store of value.
At Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, delegates from 44 allied and associate countries arrived for the opening of the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference.
In modern history, as World War II was coming to an end, in 1944, the Allied nations met at the small town of Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Here, they drafted a new financial system, which would stabilize the world's financial system once the war ended. With the United States poised to enter a golden age of prosperity, the US dollar was chosen to be the world's reserve currency.
The Bretton Woods system was created after the Second World War at the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire. And rather than using gold as the means of exchange between countries, as was the case under the old gold standard, the dollar was going to be used. The dollar was chosen because back then it was as good as gold.
Under this new system, the countries of the world would tie their currencies at a fixed rate to the US dollar. And because most of the world's gold was held in US vaults, the US dollar would be backed by gold at a fixed price of $35 per ounce. This created a system where the currencies of the world were effectively backed by gold through the US dollar.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
The Bretton Woods system lasted for about 25 years, but in August of 1971, President Richard Nixon called for an emergency press conference where he announced foreign countries would no longer be able to convert their US dollar holdings into gold. This surprise move would come to be known as the Nixon shock. With this one announcement, President Nixon effectively created our current monetary system, a system where no currency is backed by gold or anything of value. This is what is known as a fiat currency.
Fiat currency is currency that's backed by nothing except government promises. The word fiat is a Latin word, and it basically means currency that's circulating by force. If people have confidence in that currency, and if there's enough government force, that will enable the currency to circulate for a period of time until people lose confidence in the currency.
Money is a medium of exchange, and the way it has evolved is that it's always something of intrinsic value until the modern age, when the politicians say, well, we don't need anything of intrinsic value anymore. All we need is political decree. We can say this is money, this piece of paper is money. Now money has a new characteristic. But underneath it all, there's this same concept in place that nobody ever seems to challenge, and that is that governments have a right to declare something of no value to be money, and you must accept it. That's really the problem, and it's still the problem today.
Without anything tangible backing the currencies we use today, governments around the world have been able to issue unlimited amounts of new currency without restraint. And with the advent of the digital age, currencies around the world are now digits in a global banking database. So what is Bitcoin? Well, simply put, it's a digital currency, much like the electronic currency we use today. But it's also the payment network which facilitates the transfer of this new digital currency from one person to another.
Bitcoin's a new internet protocol that enables the transmission of value over a communications channel. You can think of it like being able to send a gold coin as easily as you send an email. You can send any amount of money to anyone in the world, anytime, can't be seized, can't be confiscated, can't be frozen. Very useful technology.
So Bitcoin is a digital currency and it is a payment system. So it's a payment system in the same way that bank networks are, or PayPal. Those are all payment systems. But it's also a currency. So PayPal and banks use the dollar as their currency. The Bitcoin payment system uses Bitcoins as its currency. So they both have the same name.
What is your opinion of disruptive digital currencies such as Bitcoin?
If you're looking for the idea that a currency doesn't really have to be something physical, it can be something that's virtual, that's the system we already have. You know, and if you want it to be, I want a way to make payments electronically, that's, credit cards. I mean, so exactly what it is that this thing is supposed to be doing that we don't already mostly do.
Bitcoin is different from other fiat currencies in a couple ways, but not the way people think. So most people think it's different because it is a digital currency, but fiat currencies are also digital, right? So the dollar is a digital currency, the euro is a digital currency. They're all just ones and zeros in the banks of the world. So it's not that Bitcoin is digital that makes it unique. It's unique in that it cannot be created out of thin air. So dollars, euros, yen, these can all be created out of thin air by people who have permission to do so, which is generally a central bank. Bitcoin has no ability to create it out of thin air, so it is a scarce digital asset.
Unlike the banking system we currently use, where bureaucrats meet behind closed doors and determine and regulate the supply of new currency, mathematics and cryptography are used to regulate the creation of new bitcoins. The Bitcoin network is decentralized, meaning that instead of transactions and account balances being stored on a central computer or database, Bitcoin's ledger of accounts, more commonly known as the blockchain, is distributed across tens of thousands of computers around the world.
There's something called Napster. We all remember Napster. We could download music and movies from Napster, but after a while it got so big and popular, the government came in, shut it down because of copyright infringements. No more Napster, right? So then somebody created something called the BitTorrent network. What's this? This is a software people run on their computers that allows people to file share. So if you run the software, you can go to things like Pirate Bay or Views or BT Junkie, and you can download any music or any movies you want, and they can't stop it because it's not a centralized location. Well, Bitcoin is the currency that runs on the BitTorrent network.
Why was gold and silver considered money for the last 4,000 years is because it took work and effort to make that nice, beautiful coin. They had to dig it out of the ground and refine it in the crucibles and the furnaces and stamp it into a nice, beautiful coin. And that took work. So you didn't have to trust anybody that they were going to work for you. The work was already done. Well, Bitcoin, proof of work, is the same thing, right? You have to hash away and solve all these math problems. You have to have the chips and the electricity and yada, yada, yada to create a Bitcoin. It would cost today about $800 to make a Bitcoin.
I believe that Bitcoin has multiple levels of intrinsic value. The properties like being unconfiscatable, properties like this censorship-resistant value transfer that no one can stop you from sending. More importantly, what gives it intrinsic value is the productive capacity and the brain power of some of the brightest developers in the world that have chosen to work on this open source protocol. And this productive capacity of some of the brightest minds that are building it is what truly gives it value.
All Bitcoin transactions are cryptographically verified by thousands of computers on the Bitcoin network. These very powerful computers, known as miners, expend a massive amount of energy and processing power to verify the integrity of each and every transaction.
So the miners basically validate transactions. All these transactions are flying around, and they have not yet been formally vetted by the network. If the miner believes the transactions are valid, it will put them in the block, and the block then becomes part of the blockchain. And over time, that becomes the record of truth. And so what that means is that if you receive Bitcoin and a few blocks happen after you receive it, no one can ever take that money away from you because the blocks have been stuck into the blockchain. They can't be reversed, and you know that the money is truly yours.
The decentralized nature of the Bitcoin network eliminates a single point of failure and makes it impossible to be hacked or to be shut down. Bitcoin transactions are transmitted peer-to-peer without the need for a third party, meaning that the user is in complete control of their money.
It's impossible to be shut down. That's the beautiful thing about it. There is no Bitcoin place. You can't shoot Bitcoin.
It has no center of gravity, it has no headquarters, you can't shut it down.
The only way you could is to shut off the internet. Your average person has absolutely no idea how their email works, but it works, and that's all that really matters. And Bitcoin's very similar to that. But as far as what I would do to tell people or describe to people who don't know about Bitcoin what it is, I would say it's a form of money that you can just use on your phone or your computer in today's digital age where everyone's on the internet. That is much faster to send than most of the banks. And it has, for at least since its inception in 2009, risen in value.
For new users, the inner workings of Bitcoin can be quite complex and daunting. But what's important is how this revolutionary technology changes how money is transferred globally.
Right now, every single payment that you make to another person goes through an intermediary. Either PayPal or bank or Visa or MasterCard. And more importantly, the governmental jurisdiction decides if you're allowed to make that payment. That payment could be stopped halfway through, and then you have to try and get your money back. With Bitcoin, no one can stop it. The moment you decide to send another person digital value, you can just send it. And there is nobody in your way. There is no one that has to give you permission to pay another person money, and all they need is an internet connection.
This has the potential to displace the need for banks as a trust institution. If you and I exchange currency or have commerce using Bitcoin and it goes on the ledger, on the blockchain, we don't need a bank to confirm that that is a valid transaction.
One of the differences between Bitcoin and the banking system is it doesn't require a third party to perform. When you make a deposit into a checking account or a savings account, you are actually loaning the bank your currency. They now have title to it, and they have a liability on their books to pay you back one day, but they get to do anything they want with it. And you have this intermediary, this third party, counterparty that has to perform for you to be able to get your currency back. Cryptocurrencies invert the power structure. It isn't a few people at the top controlling a whole bunch of people at the bottom. The power goes to the individual.
In the same way that the internet flattened access to information and allowed anyone in the world with an internet connection to learn basically anything they wanted to know and to communicate with anyone else on Earth, Bitcoin does that with money. So now anyone on the planet, no matter their age or the arbitrary geographic location in which they were born, or the arbitrary rules of the people that govern over them, that person can now engage economically with anyone else in the world directly. And that's profoundly powerful. You do not need a bank account to interact with Bitcoin. You do not need a bank account now to receive an honest payment from someone else in the world and know that the money is legitimate and good and can't be rescinded. So money now can't be censored. Any two people can send it between each other through Bitcoin.
Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin.
Expect to get rich or hope to get rich because they need to protect themselves against both destroyed fiat currencies and against capital controls. So when people think of it as an investment, they have to realize that the reason that Bitcoin's...
One of the great powers of whether it's Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies, if we can figure out how to scale the technology, we can solve a lot of problems in the financial system. We can transact with each other globally at very low cost and very efficiently. And there's tremendous market power in that. It has nothing to do with anyone in the financial system. People want to be able to communicate and transact with each other simply and quickly, and the hunger to do that is enormous.
Today, Bitcoin is seen as a financial asset. But as the technology develops, the blockchain that powers Bitcoin may be used to verify transactions other than the transfer of money. Each Bitcoin is divisible into 100 millionth of a Bitcoin, called a Satoshi. These tiny fractions of a Bitcoin can be programmed to represent assets other than money. In this way, the Bitcoin blockchain can be used to verify transactions of all kinds of items without the need for a central authority.
The Bitcoin blockchain is a tremendous...
As the internet was to publishing, but this is disruptive to these 100 different institutions that really are the glue that pulls society together. You know, everything from as mundane as notary publics to the land titling, to coining money, to voting. All kinds of these things are going to be recreated in the blockchain in a way that we will finally be able to fully trust. What that means is what we've seen technology do to lots of private industries is now going to start doing to government function.
The thing for me is understanding the implications of what this is. You can take 100 million bits of a Bitcoin, each bit is called a Satoshi, right? And you can program that to be anything of value. It can represent titles to automobiles or real estate or diamonds or gold or votes in elections. Anything of value can now be digitized and tokenized, put up on the blockchain and transacted, can be sent across the internet without having to go through a trusted third party.
I think the blockchain and Bitcoin is going to change the world. I think it's going to change everything in terms of protecting people's identities, allowing people to own property. Bitcoin's for the 2 billion people that don't have bank accounts, the 5 billion people that can't prove they exist, they don't have title to real estate and stuff. That's what Bitcoin's going to change the most for those people, is because, you know, they're going to jump from the third world to the first world. It's really going to revolutionize Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, where people can finally now own real estate. We can have a transparent election that can't be hacked. Imagine. That's going to change the world in and of itself.
Tempers are beginning to flare. These people have already been in queue for more than 3 hours now. Carrying currency notes, the government suddenly backed on Tuesday night.
Because anyone can start using Bitcoin by simply installing an app on their phone, Bitcoin can be used by the developing world to protect their wealth from unstable currencies and government control.
We're seeing it behave as a crisis currency in Venezuela, in Nigeria, in Zimbabwe. When these countries can't get a grasp on their own monetary policy, people flood to Bitcoin.
The fate of the unbanked and underbanked population no longer lies in the hands of corrupt governments, centrally planned economies, and central banks. There's a new option, a plan B.
Personally, I live in the United States, and a lot of people in the US get bank accounts very easily, have credit cards, debit cards, and all of that, and they don't find that there are too many frictions and pain points. But in a country like India, there are 233 million individuals who are unbanked, who don't have access to a traditional financial infrastructure, and so they're operating cash payment to cash payment. But Bitcoin has become a game changer. So individuals, in essence, can hold on to it, they can spend it, they can transfer it internationally. There are so many use cases.
Currently, Bitcoin transactions can sometimes carry a significant fee, making it unsuitable for use for small transactions. But Bitcoin is programmable money, meaning that new layers and technologies can be integrated into it. In the near future, one such development, called the Lightning Network, will help reduce the cost of Bitcoin transactions.
At the moment, Bitcoin is actually suffering from being too popular. One of the challenges that Bitcoin has is every transaction needs computational power to process. So at the moment, Bitcoin can settle about 4 to 7 transactions a second. And in the future, each of those 4 to 7 transactions a second can contain 1 million transactions within it. And that's what the second layer and Lightning is trying to do. It will just make it so much more efficient and so much cheaper for the average person.
The integration of the Lightning Network into the Bitcoin protocol will scale Bitcoin into a fast, cheap, and efficient payment system. Once implemented, this will have enormous implications for the developing world.
One of the stumbling blocks to doing international business is the payment system. And to be honest, if you're taking credit cards from some countries, those countries are so associated with fraud that your rates on all credit cards you take just become astronomical and it becomes prohibitive.
something like 33% of the credit card transactions coming out of Africa are fraudulent. So nobody wants to take business from Africa. It's just too risky. With Bitcoin, you know the funds are good. So as a merchant, yeah, pay with Bitcoin. Also, anything you want, that's legal to Africa. That has tremendous implications, to be able to get access to these types of products and services so seamlessly. And then they're able to start having property rights. And property rights is really what's going to help lift them up out of poverty.
Closer to home, in today's digital world, governments have started to phase out cash, replacing it with digital currency. In this environment where concerns over personal privacy are very real, Bitcoin provides monetary sovereignty outside the control of government policy.
When you have a situation where the government is trying to control, they don't want people to have the means of hiding anything from them. Not just from a tax standpoint, they want to know what everyone's doing in Big Brother fashion. So, the way that I look at Bitcoin is it's the ultimate monetary weapon that the people have never had in history.
Every government in the world wants to go cashless. One of the reasons is that in a cashless society, you are not able to exit the banking system. When people panic, they run to the ATM machines, they run to the bank and they withdraw money. The other thing is the governments are starting to run out of money, and governments don't build anything. They just use other people's money. So they are treating everyone as a tax evader. I believe the main reason why Bitcoin is so popular and important is not because of its finite supply and being gold. It's because of anti-money laundering laws preventing people from doing what they want with their money.
One of the main functions of government is to create currency. And Bitcoin is successful only because of its potential for circumvention, lack of oversight. So it seems to me it ought to be outlawed. It doesn't serve any socially useful function.
As to whether or not Bitcoin is illegal or should be seen to be illegal, cash has been used for a whole heck of a lot more illegal things than Bitcoin has through the years and still is today. Cash is untraceable. It's easily transportable. Nobody knows where that dollar has been and how it's been moved from hand to hand to hand. So it's just a matter of making that connection that a cryptocurrency is really not a new thing. It's just a different version and a digital form of something that's existed in our society and legal structures for millennia.
Bitcoin is shifting the paradigm and challenging the legacy financial system. Recently, Jamie Dimon, chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, America's largest bank, was quoted calling Bitcoin a fraud.
Why is Bitcoin a fraud? Here's the reason. Governments, the first thing they do is form a currency. They like to control the currency. They control it through a central bank. They also like to know who has it, where it is, where it's going. Wait until someone gets hurt. Wait until it's used for illicit purposes, which it is somewhat used for illicit purposes. They close it down.
You got people like Jamie Dimon, a serious guy, calling it a fraud.
Calling it fraud? You mean like those hundreds of billions of dollars of securities that Jamie Dimon sold the public a decade ago called mortgage-backed securities? He's calling Bitcoin a fraud? Is that going to go to zero like his securities that he sold the public?
Now, first with respect to asking a banker about whether they like Bitcoin or not, that's kind of like asking a king, do you like democracy? It's just so thoroughly frustrating and insulting when people who know very little about what we do watch an up-and-coming technology and have the audacity to call us all criminals. We're not the criminals here. The whole damn reason this ecosystem exists is because they're the criminals. And it doesn't really matter at this point what he thinks. The genie's out of the bottle. Somebody in this room or somebody at this conference or somebody around the world is going to solve the problem of decentralized lending and value-stable currencies and decentralized exchange. And within 5 to 10 years, banks will become less and less relevant, just like landline telephones are becoming less and less relevant. And we're going to wake up one day and we're going to be in charge of our own money. And Jamie Dimon, in retirement, can watch the world as it is, not the world as he would like it to be.
The Bitcoin blockchain is built on decentralized consensus outside the control of a central party. However, with the hype in the rise of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, both central banks and commercial banks have started to develop their own digital currencies under the guise of what they call blockchain technology.
My big fear is that what is going to happen is blockchain technology will be adopted by governments, and fiat national currencies will be run on blockchain technologies, and the whole monetary system globally will eventually become cashless. And at that point, if it's centralized and there's an entity that runs the blockchain, they can lock you out of it if they don't like what you're doing, and they can trace everything that you do. Every transaction, everywhere you go, will be recorded. And so, if we're not careful, this has the ability to enslave us or free us.
I think blockchain or any kind of open ledger distributive database will have a tremendous impact on our world. My fear is that, and this is used to centralize, digital technology gives a banker the ability to put a chip in you, to tax you whenever they want, to interface with a money system with you physically, and to perfect the collateral. So I love the innovation, and the question for all of us is, how can we innovate and make the financial system more efficient and do it in a way at the same time where we distribute the power lines in the political system?
The blockchain is a technology, which is a good technology. We actually use it. It will be used for a lot of different things. God bless the blockchain. Cryptocurrencies and digital currencies, I think are also fine. JP Morgan moves $6 trillion around the world every day. We don't do it in cash. It's done digitally. If it can be done digitally with the blockchain, so be it. But it'll still be a dollar cryptocurrency.
A majority of the people are using the word blockchain, and they don't really care whether it has this decentralized mining. The government is going to just have a digital representation of the dollar. They can call it a blockchain, but there's not going to be mining. There's not going to be decentralization. It's going to be a centralized coin. Whether they call it a blockchain or not is irrelevant.
The whole purpose of a blockchain is to remove control from a central party. If you're a central bank and you make a blockchain for dollars, and then you have dollar coin, if you still have full control over the dollar coin, you can create how much of it you want, you can control where it goes. There was no point in having a blockchain at all. You might as well just have a centralized database like a banking system. To really use blockchains in any meaningful way, it means that there is no person in charge. And so a central bank, by definition, is the one who is supposed to be in charge of money. And thus they would never create a blockchain or a cryptocurrency that they couldn't control. So that's why they will likely be made redundant, because the market can choose what kind of money it uses. And it now has a choice between a digital currency that can be controlled by central parties and inflated without limit, or a digital currency that cannot be controlled by any central party and that has a fixed amount and can't be debased. Over time, that's going to be a very obvious choice.
Bitcoin and the blockchain behind it are incredibly powerful technologies. As the future unfolds, these technologies could be used to restructure the financial system into one of fairness and equality for all, a system outside the control of the banking elite.
We have millions of people now taking an interest in what is money, the question of what is money, what should it be? And they're learning, especially a lot of young people.
Precious metals were once money. Then came the era of paper money. Could we now be entering a golden age of decentralized digital money? Only time will tell.
Bitcoin is first and foremost about changing how the financial system of the planet operates. However, Bitcoin is also a financial asset itself, and it goes through these bubbles, and people have made many millions of dollars when they buy it low, and then it goes up in value. But that's not really what matters at all. What matters is that it's actually going to change the entire ecosystem of the planet, how all humans interact with each other, and that's a very exciting thing to be part of.
Or of war. Instead, it is a time of abundance, creativity, and peace. Our families who spent generations rebuilding since 1948, were not ruined this time because their money did not collapse. Their money protected them, just as they had planned. It protected their property, their real estate, their farmlands, their factories, their businesses, their charities, and their art collections. Moreover, it protected human beings. It protected responsible, hardworking, honest human beings. It protected freedom. Their money, Bitcoin, the something that sole engineer released in 2009, was the key technology that prevented a repeat of the destructive tragedies of the 20th century. The people and families who embraced this incorruptible money were saved. They now engage in multi-generational enterprises which are taking human flourishing to new heights. Agriculture is revolutionized. Gone are the days where farmers are beholden to giant monopolies. Gone are unnecessary pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. Gone is dead, dry dirt. Gone is low-nutrient food. Gone is the unsustainable monocrop, unhealthy agriculture of the late 20th and early 21st century. Gone are antibiotics and hormones in livestock. Some of our families restored the land with an agriculture rich in diversity, grown on soil that has naturally regenerated. Livestock, formerly imprisoned in pens, now pastures freely on the plains, contributing to this regeneration. In just 20 years, the earth, the dirt, the land, the soil has healed. The food is delicious, it is nutritious, and it is produced ethically and sustainably. Other families revolutionized education. Gone are national curriculums which commanded that all children must learn the same material, at the same age, at the same pace. Gone are costly yet worthless degrees. These are replaced with individualized instruction, allowing everyone to learn at their own speed. Each child focuses on their own towering strengths so they can spend their lives doing what they love and sharing their gifts and talents with others. Abundant and free education feeds everyone's minds whenever they are hungry for new knowledge. There is ample, beautiful, and practical housing throughout the world. Everyone has access to water, power, heat, internet, roadways, stores, and all the local cultural amenities. This too is thanks to the efforts of families whose wealth was protected by sound money. New manufacturing techniques and the elimination of bureaucracy have helped make housing accessible, but most importantly, the end of home price inflation, driven by fractional reserve lending, is gone. Housing is now affordable to billions. Land serves only as an employed commodity for residences or other productive endeavors, or, as so much of it now is, to be preserved for nature to do with as she pleases. The energy humanity uses has been revolutionized. Inexpensive, small, safe, and clean nuclear generators are deployed all over the world, providing nearly unlimited access to energy for all. Thanks to local energy production everywhere, gone are wars fought over it. This energy abundance exists because it pays to produce energy, since the world's money is earned and secured by energy itself. With defensible freedom, these families ushered in a second renaissance of art and culture. Art celebrating the human spirit of creativity and responsibility. Art exhibiting splendor, beauty, and intelligence. Art that represents civilization's new treasures. It is commissioned, protected, and preserved by those whose wealth is protected and preserved by sound money. This is an age of optimism, hope, creativity, and productivity. The world is building wealth that is no longer measured in the quantity of currency, since the amount of currency is hardly changing. What has wealth become? It is now the sustainable, expanding, uncorrupted productivity of all humanity, enjoyed by all. It is measured in the quality of life of all men.
Ben Bernanke, Bitcoin has serious problems. Do you think there's some kind of contradiction here? Or do you think that Bernanke has flip-flopped on the issue? Or do you suspect that Bernanke was always secretly behind Bitcoin but couldn't admit it until now? If so, then you have fallen for an embarrassingly simple trick. That trick is to use the words Bitcoin and blockchain and cryptocurrency and digital currency interchangeably as if they are all the same thing. They are not. Confused? Well, fear not. Our good friends at the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, have written a handy-dandy article that explains everything to you in simple, everyday language. They've even illustrated that article with easy-to-understand infographics. Just kidding. Their unwieldy article on central bank cryptocurrencies is a predictably hot mess of monetary jargon and Venn diagrams that somehow make things look even more complicated than they sound. Now, to be fair, their proposed new taxonomy of money has real explanatory power, and the diagrams that result are genuinely insightful, but it hardly makes for light bedtime reading. So let's see if we can make it a little easier, shall we? A blockchain is a cryptographically secured ledger that can be permissionless and decentralized. The geeks in the crowd will appreciate the fact that the blockchain is a stupendously elegant solution to some incredibly complicated problems in the obscure recesses of arcane subjects like distributed computing and payment processing. But for the non-geeks, perhaps this will suffice. Some of the oldest documents ever discovered have been ledgers of one sort or another. Medical records, legal and business contracts, accounting ledgers. As long as there has been civilization, there has been the need for secure and accurate record-keeping of transactions and events. And since the birth of civilization, there has only been one way to keep those records. A system where a recognized central administrator stores, secures, and updates that ledger. Until now, that is. With the advent of the blockchain, an accurate ledger can now be maintained without a single central point where that information is stored, maintained, or updated. Registrars? Notaries? You might as well be talking about farriers and chimney sweeps. So how does it work? And what does it do? Mike Maloney, the filmmaker behind the popular Hidden Secrets of Money documentary series, describes it this way.
The system that Bitcoin runs on is called blockchain. Think of it as a modern version of an old-fashioned bookkeeping ledger, but instead of a handwritten list of entries and calculations, a blockchain is a digital list of entries and calculations. A block is simply a bundle of transactions. Think of a block as a whole page of transactions in the old-fashioned ledger. A blockchain is just a chain of blocks. It's the same as a whole series of pages in the old-fashioned ledger. Easy, huh? Here's how it works. The Bitcoin blockchain actually exists in every one of the millions of computers on the network as exact copies of each other. However, for this example, so that we can zoom in and you can really see just how a blockchain works, I'm going to show it as one giant blockchain in the middle of a small network of computers. Let's follow a pizza transaction with Bitcoin. When the transaction occurs, it first appears on the network in a pool of unconfirmed transactions, along with thousands of others from all around the world. Millions of different computers from the network then gather some of these transactions and place them in their own blocks. The computers are all creating blocks constantly in the hope that theirs will be the next one added to the official chain. A new block is added to the chain every 10 minutes or so, when one of the computers wins the right to have its block recognized as the next in the chain and is rewarded with a prize of newly created bitcoins. The way a computer wins the prize is by trying to guess the answer to an extremely difficult math problem. In fact, the problem is so difficult that even with millions of computers making guesses billions or even trillions of times per second, it still takes roughly 10 minutes to find the answer. Once one of the computers guesses the correct answer and wins, all of the millions of computers on the network that did not win are instructed to throw away all the work they have done, update their ledgers with the block from the winning computer, and start again with a new math problem. In doing so, the computers use an immense amount of power and cost a literal fortune to run. So why do they do it? because it can be very profitable. This is where the term mining for bitcoins comes from. Instead of striking gold by mining for precious metals in the wilderness, these computers are hoping to strike Bitcoin by mining precious numbers on the blockchain.
But talking about the blockchain is like talking about the printing press. Yes, it's revolutionary. Yes, it will change the course of history. But what specifically does it print? Well, whatever you want it to, of course. A papal bull or the 95 Theses, the 9/11 Commission Report or the Road to 9/11, a GMO cookbook or the Anarchist cookbook, colorful pieces of toilet paper or Federal Reserve notes, but I repeat myself. So what does the blockchain record? Well, whatever you want it to, of course. It can be used as a tool for creating smart contracts, or registering land ownership, or creating decentralized cryptocurrencies. This is where Bitcoin comes in. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer cryptocurrency whose transactions are recorded in a public blockchain ledger. There are 3 things to note about this description of Bitcoin. First, Bitcoin is just one application of the blockchain ledger technology. They are not the same thing. Bitcoin is not blockchain. Blockchain is not Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses the blockchain innovation to run an electronic payment system. It's important to stress this point. Confusing these terms is a purposeful tactic that a lot of 21st century snake oil salesmen are using to sucker a public that sees the Bitcoin bubble and believes this is the next great investment opportunity. This baffle them with BS technique has been ridiculously effective in some cases. In one infamous example, the Long Island Iced Tea Corporation recently rebranded as the Long Blockchain Corporation. They still make iced tea, they just added blockchain to their name, and the market responded. The company's stocks tripled overnight. This is the exact phenomenon we saw emerge during the dot-com bubble, when any company that added .com to their name saw their stock price rise. And it is a sure sign that people are being baffled by techno-speak that they don't understand in the slightest. Andreas Antonopoulos provides some straightforward advice for separating blockchain from BS.
So let's get started. What exactly is going on here? Is this the greatest technological innovation and explosion of innovation since the mobile internet, or maybe even the internet itself? Or is this the greatest load of hype ever arranged around a technology in the history of technology? Both. And in fact, that's a characteristic of advanced technologies. I often say that where Bitcoin and the other open blockchains are today is approximately where the internet is in 1992. In terms of technology, in terms of infrastructure deployment, in terms of adoption patterns, this technology is approximately where the internet was in 1992. But the hype around blockchain is exactly where the hype around the internet was in 1998. You know what comes next. There will be a shakeout. When the waters recede, you can tell who on the beach wasn't wearing a swimsuit. They stand there naked. It's an empty promise. This will happen in the blockchain space. There is a lot of bull being peddled to VCs, to investors, to initial coin offering buyers, to uneducated investors. There's a lot of Ponzi schemes. There's a lot of pyramid schemes. There's a lot of empty promises. There's also a lot of business as usual disguised as innovation, disguised as disruptive technology. Now, out of that came this fantastic saying, blockchain is the technology behind Bitcoin, which is incorrect. Blockchain is one of the 4 foundational technologies behind Bitcoin, and it can't stand alone. But that hasn't stopped people from trying to sell it. Blockchain is Bitcoin with a haircut and a suit that you parade in front of your board. It's the ability to deliver a sanitized, clean, comfortable version of blockchain, of Bitcoin, to people who are too terrified of actually disruptive technology. And so you get into this very strange world where the words no longer mean anything. Can you define blockchain for me? I think a few people in this room could probably define blockchain, but the real challenge would be, can you define blockchain in such a way that I can't do search and replace with the word database and still make that sentence work? Because that's the challenge. If what you're doing is a database with signatures, it's not interesting. It's boring. What is the essence of Bitcoin? It's not blockchain. The essence of Bitcoin is the ability to operate in a decentralized way without having to trust anyone. The essence of Bitcoin is to be able to use software to authoritatively, independently, without appeal to authority, verify everything yourself. You don't trust the other nodes you're talking to. You assume they're lying. You don't trust the miners. You don't trust the people creating the transactions. You don't trust anything other than the outcome of your own verification and validation. And through that, you end up trusting in something more important, the network effect. Bitcoin introduced the concept of decentralized security through computation. And this has not yet sunk in. What Bitcoin does is it allows you to replace a security model that is based around concentric circles of access and control with an institution in the center, with a security model that is inside out, open and accessible to everyone. A security model that is based on market forces and game theory. It is the first market-based security model, where a series of incentives and punishments ensure that the ultimate result is you can trust the platform itself as a neutral arbiter that is not controlled by anyone, without third parties, without intermediaries. Bitcoin revolutionizes trust.
The second thing to note in our definition of Bitcoin is that it is a cryptocurrency. That means it uses cryptographic functions to secure and verify transactions on the network and to control the issuance of new units. Bitcoin conforms to a certain protocol, and that protocol defines the rules by which the Bitcoin network operates. You can tweak those rules and create similar but separate payment systems, each with its own qualities. These Bitcoin-like cryptocurrencies are called altcoins. Thirdly, Bitcoin uses a specific kind of blockchain ledger called a public or permissionless blockchain. This means anyone can join the network and contribute to the maintenance of the ledger, mining in the Bitcoin parlance. There is another kind of blockchain called a private or permissioned blockchain that requires nodes to be invited to join the network or otherwise given permission to participate in maintaining the ledger. And as a further level of analysis, it should be noted that all cryptocurrencies are digital currencies, but not all digital currencies are cryptocurrencies. Oh, and then there's virtual currencies, which are technically speaking another thing altogether. Okay, this is starting to get confusing, isn't it? This is about the point where we'd need to bust out the Venn diagrams and start coloring the overlapping parts, right? Well, if you've followed all of this, good for you. If not, don't sweat it. The point for today is simply to recognize that there are a lot of separate but related concepts here, and to talk about them as if they are all just one big monolithic thing is not just unhelpful, but purposefully misleading. So, with all of this in mind, let's look at those Bernanke headlines again. Former chairman of Federal Reserve to speak at blockchain conference. And Ben Bernanke, Bitcoin has serious problems. Are you at least beginning to get a handle on how these headlines are not contradictory? How it could be that a central banker could be interested in blockchain technology, but dislike the Bitcoin application of that technology? If not, think of it this way. The same DVD player that can play Century of Enslavement can also play The Federal Reserve and You. The same printing press that can print Crossfire, the plot that killed Kennedy, can also be used to print the Warren Commission report. The same web browser that can take you to CorbettReport.com can also take you to nytimes.com. And no, I'm not recommending that you go there. So yes, the blockchain could be used to create digital currencies that represent the very vision of a totalitarian tyrant's wildest wet dream. Central banks could use private blockchains to administer national digital currencies that permanently record and track every transaction in the economy. That currency could be distributed through government-issued digital wallets that act as an individual ID and allow the government to track everything you ever purchase back to you personally. It could be used to create the perfect system of panoptic oversight, and the totalitarians could, as sole proprietors of the private blockchain, target anyone they saw as a threat for removal from the economy by simply revoking their wallet. And yes, the blockchain could be used to create a digital currency that represents the bankster's worst nightmare. Free individuals could use a public blockchain to create a cryptocurrency not issued by or subject to any central authority. Or they could use it to raise untaxable crypto funds for agoristic startup ventures through unregistered ICOs. Or it could be used to transfer value or property instantaneously across the imaginary lines on the map that define the supposed boundaries of the would-be tyrants' geographical monopolies, without the permission of said tyrants. Are you starting to get the picture? A gun can be used by a jackbooted minion of the police state to murder you and your family, or it can be used by you to defend yourself and your family. It is a tool, just like the blockchain, and can be used for good or for ill.
So, what I'd like to equip you with is a set of criteria to understand when you are being presented with something, perhaps to invest, or to be employed, or to engage in some way. And it calls itself a blockchain, or a distributed ledger, or one of these other names that are coming out. How can you tell? Blockchain or bull? They both start with a B. What's the difference? If you can replace the word blockchain with database and the brochure reads the same, it's business as usual. It's not decentralized. It's not borderless, neutral, censorship resistant, open. It reestablishes trust in intermediaries. It's just a database. And that is not disruptive. The idea that we're going to take this technology and use it to improve the operating margins of centralized institutions of trust so that they can continue business as usual, I'd say it's abhorrent, but that's a strong word. It's just boring. Really, really boring. No one got into this in order to make a few billions for a financial services clearinghouse. And if you did, I'm really sorry. It's boring. What's really exciting is the possibility of fundamentally changing the way we allocate trust on this planet, opening up the ability to collaborate, transact, engage on a global level with everyone. Simply by means of downloading an application, you can become part of a giant platform of trust that doesn't care who you are or where you came from, that doesn't require permission to participate or innovate, where a 12-year-old JavaScript programmer has the same influence as power as JP Morgan Chase. More, in fact, because they're doing open source and feeding into a community of collaboration that is creating a tsunami of innovation. Taking this technology and using it to strengthen the same centralized institutions so that they can improve their bottom line, is boring. That is not what blockchain is. That's just a database. And it doesn't change anything. In fact, there are some rather disturbing possibilities in this model. Let's think about it for a second. The most commonly expressed application for these new distributed ledger technologies is to replace the function of a centralized clearinghouse with a consortium of n participants, where n is 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, known, permissioned, controlled participants who will assemble transactions and sign them rather than compete through market forces in a security model like Bitcoin. We discard currency as the underlying mechanism for building market-based security. We discard proof of work as wasteful because all it allows you to do is decentralized, secure, neutral, censorship-resistant blockchain. And we trust 5 named parties to sign transactions. At that point, they don't need to assemble these transactions in blocks. They can just sign the individual transactions. They don't need to chain them together, because absent proof of work and a system of currency incentives, rewriting that is easy. There's no immutability. So it's not a blockchain anymore, because there's no blocks and there's no chain. Now that's at a technical level, but let's look at the more important level. What do you achieve by replacing a clearinghouse with a consortium of players? You know, there's something unique a clearinghouse does. If you understand the role of a clearinghouse, one of its most important functions is that it is not a participant in the market. It has no skin in the game. The New York Stock Exchange is not an active trader. That's not an accident. That's called separation of concerns. The clearinghouse is an independent party with oversight that is not a market participant. If you take that party out and replace it with 5 banks, all of which have skin in the game, how do you run a consensus algorithm when the incentives to cheat, front run, manipulate the market, and break the consensus rules, even adversarially against the other 4 parties, are so high? There's no incentive to keep the consensus rules. All you're doing is you're saying, trust us, we're in a consortium. Trust us? These 5 banks? Where were you in 2008? Where were you when Libor was fixed? Where were you when the gold markets were fixed? Where were you when front-running and high-frequency trading was creating these monsters of crony capitalism? Trust us? Hell no. Removing the clearinghouse and replacing it with, what's the word? It's not consortium. Cartel, that's the word. With a cartel of the same market makers who have manipulated and compromised every market in history, and doing that in a way that closes this from transparency, that's not a recipe for efficiency, immutability, security, transparency. That's not a blockchain. That's a bullshit. It's a very profitable bullshit. It requires you to have confidence in the game. A con game, as it's known. Be careful what you evaluate when you see these technologies taking something whose fundamental purpose is to remove trusted intermediaries and create an open, borderless, neutral system, and turning it into a tool for a bunch of untrustworthy trusted parties to manipulate markets is going to be a disaster. And they're going to do it.
Now, let's look once again at the statements that opened this podcast episode. Is the blockchain revolutionary? Well, since no decentralized peer-to-peer ledger has ever existed before, yes, it is that rarest of rare things. Something new under the sun. Is Bitcoin Tulip Mania 2.0? Yes, in the exact same sense that the dot-com bubble of the 90s was Tulip Mania 2.0. Just as Pets.com and other ventures that earned and lost hundreds of millions of dollars in the blink of an eye were the result of a speculative frenzy, so too are the sudden run-ups and rundowns in Bitcoin's price the result of a speculative frenzy. But the bursting of the dot-com bubble wasn't the end of the World Wide Web, any more than a future bursting of the Bitcoin speculation bubble will be the end of cryptocurrency, or even Bitcoin. Is cryptocurrency a nail in the coffin of the banksters? Yes. Cryptocurrencies can now be, and already are being used by millions around the world for instantaneous and virtually free international remittances, all without the aid of a bank account. Startups have raised billions of dollars in capital through ICOs, without a VC predator or investment bank underwriter in sight. More broadly, a whole host of banksters and their associated cronies in the third-party middleman parasitic class are already openly contemplating the fact that they have already been made obsolete by the blockchain technology which underlies the cryptocurrency boom. So is the blockchain the one and only silver bullet that will end banking all by itself? Don't be ridiculous. But it is one more arrow for the quiver. Is digital currency a tool of the totalitarian tyrants? Well, we've already seen how the BIS is musing about central bank-issued cryptocurrencies, and we've contemplated how that nightmare scenario of control and surveillance might unfold. It hardly takes a Nostradamus to envision how the forces of centralization are going to push as hard as they can to put the cryptocurrency genie safely back in the bottle of central bank-issued fiat. Are any of these statements contradictory? Nope. But the Bitcoin PSYOP might have made you think they were. And now, you know better. So, here's a test of your newfound, nuanced understanding of the intricacies of digital currencies. Can you explain how this headline, China's central bank has begun cautiously testing a digital currency, and this headline, China is shutting down all of Beijing's Bitcoin and cryptocurrency exchanges, are perfectly compatible? If so, then give yourself a pat on the back. You've just seen through the Bitcoin PSYOP. A version of this podcast first appeared in the Corbett Report subscriber newsletter in September 2017. To keep up to date with the newsletter and to support the Corbett Report, please subscribe today.